Okay, so you know that feeling, right? Like when you just really want to get something. You know what I mean? Not just skim the surface, but like truly understand what's going on.
Yeah, so
I think that's why you're here, right? You want to learn stuff without getting bogged down with too much info. Just straight to the good stuff.
absolutely.
Well, today we're diving into a pretty famous story, one you've probably heard before, but we're going to look at it in a way that reveals a really basic but important scientific idea.
That's right. We're going way back to the story of Archimedes and the king's crown in ancient Syracuse.
About 250 BCE.
Right around then. It's a pretty simple story on the surface, but it's a great example of how smart Archimedes was, and it kind of marks a turning point in how we understand the world around us.
So in this deep dive, we're going beyond just that Eureka moment that everyone knows. We're going to see how this whole thing shows Archimedes' genius and reveals a key concept about matter itself.
Exactly. And to do that, we're going to be looking at some historical accounts to tell the story.
Perfect. So let's set the scene.
Yeah.
Okay. It's 250 BCE in Syracuse, King Hiero. The second, he decides he wants a magnificent gold crown, to show off his power and wealth.
Of course, as you do.
Right. And the story goes that soon after the crown is finished, the king starts to get suspicious. He thinks maybe the goldsmith, the guy who made the crown,
Thought he tried to cheat him.
yeah, maybe swapped out some of that gold for something cheaper.
Like silver.
Exactly. So now the king's got this awesome crown, but he's not so sure it's cracked up to be.
He's got a problem.
Right. How can he figure out if it's really pure gold without, melting it down?
Destroying it.
Yeah, that's not an option.
No way. Not for a royal crown.
So it's a real dilemma, isn't it? How do you check what something's made of without messing it up?
Exactly. You need a really clever solution, a way to test its purity without, breaking it.
And so who does the king turn to?
Well, in Syracuse at that time, if you had a tricky problem, there was one person to call.
Archimedes.
The guy was a genius mathematician engineer,
Right.
the best mind around.
So the king's like, Archimedes, I need your help. Figure out if my crown is really gold, but whatever you do, don't damage it.
High stakes.
Big time. So now Archimedes has to figure this out. And I imagine he must have been racking his brain at first.
Yeah. It's not an easy problem.
Yeah.
The answer wasn't obvious.
Right. It's not like he could just weigh it.
Yeah.
Because a mix of gold and silver could end up weighing the same as pure gold.
That's the tricky part.
And that's where the famous bathtub story comes in.
Ah, yes. The Eureka moment.
We all know it, but let's think about what actually happened. So Archimedes is taking a bath, right? He gets into the tub and he sees the water level rising.
Seems pretty normal.
Yeah, something we see every day. But here's the thing. Archimedes didn't just ignore it. He saw something important in that everyday event.
He did, and this is key. He realized that the amount of water that spilled out of the tub was the exact same as the volume of his body that was underwater. And that was a huge realization. Before this, the idea of measuring the volume of oddly shaped things by using displacement, that wasn't a common thing. This wasn't just about the crown. It was a step towards understanding the physical world in a more precise way.
So the volume of water pushed out equals the volume of the thing in the water. That's it. That's the connection.
And then he makes the link to density, right? Because gold and silver, they have different densities.
Right. So for the same silver would take up more space than gold.
Exactly. Think of density as how tightly packed the stuff is inside an object. A dense object has a lot of matter crammed into a small space.
So even though gold and that gold-silver mix could weigh the same,
Yeah.
If the crown had silver in it, it would be bigger because silver isn't as dense as gold.
It would take up more space.
And therefore, it would push out more water.
Precisely.
And that's when it hits him. The story says Archimedes jumps out of the bath, totally forgets he's naked,
Doesn't care.
runs through the streets shouting, Eureka!
Which means, I have found it.
Can you imagine? That must have been some serious scientific excitement.
It's like the ultimate aha moment. It makes you wonder about those times in our own lives when things just click.
Right, when we suddenly understand something.
What causes those moments?
So the Eureka is the big idea, but how did he actually test the crown? What did the experiment look like?
It was actually pretty clever and straightforward. He took the crown and carefully placed it in a container filled to the very top with water. And he measured the amount of water that spilled out that gave him the exact volume of the crown, no matter how complicated its shape was.
Got it. So now he knows how much space the crown takes up. Then what?
Then he took an equal weight of pure gold, exactly the same weight as the crown, and did the same thing. Put it in a container filled with water and measured how much water spilled out.
Okay, so he's comparing the two amounts of water.
Exactly. If the crown was pure gold, it would push out the exact same amount of water as the pure gold. But if the crown pushed out more water, it would mean it was less dense.
And that would prove there was silver in it.
Precisely.
And what happened?
Well, the story says the experiment proved the king, right? The crown did push out more water than the pure gold. It wasn't pure.
That sneaky Goldsmith.
Busted.
I bet the king was happy.
Oh, yeah. He finally had proof, thanks to Archimedes and his clever method.
The historical accounts say the goldsmith was confronted, but they don't always say what happened to him. I'm sure he got what he deserved.
Probably. But the main point is that Archimedes was able to use his knowledge of math and physics to solve a real-world problem.
And it wasn't just about the crown. This discovery led to something much bigger.
Right. It gave us what we now call Archimedes' Principle.
Which is?
It says that anything you put in a fluid, whether it's liquid or gas, it feels an upward force. We call it buoyancy. And how strong that force is depends on the weight of the fluid that the object pushes aside.
So like a boat floating on water.
Exactly. Or a hot air balloon rising.
That's all because of this principle that Archimedes figured out.
And think about it. That simple observation in the bathtub led to the whole field of fluid mechanics, how liquids and gases behave, especially when forces are acting on them.
It's amazing, isn't it? We don't even think about it, but being able to travel by sea or air.
It all goes back to basic insights like Archimedes.
So even small observations can have huge and lasting effects on technology and how we understand the world.
Absolutely.
But the story of Eureka itself, it's become much more than just a cool story from ancient Greece.
Yeah. It represents those moments when we have a sudden realization, a breakthrough that seems to come out of nowhere.
Like when you're stuck on a problem and then suddenly the solution hits you.
It shows how creative humans can be, how we can discover things in unexpected ways.
So this story about a crown in a bathtub, it's not just a fun historical anecdote.
It's a reminder that we should always be looking for the truth. And it shows how much joy there is in figuring out how things work.
It also shows how amazing our brains are at solving problems.
And it highlights that big discoveries don't always need fancy equipment or complicated experiments. Sometimes the best ideas come from the simplest things.
We just have to be open to them.
Like Archimedes saw the water rising in his bath, and it helped him figure out the secret of the king's crown.
Exactly. So to recap, we've got a king who's suspicious, a genius mathematician, a bathtub revelation, and the birth of a fundamental principle in physics.
It's a great example of how solving a practical problem can lead to a big leap in our knowledge.
And it all started with a bath.
Who would have thought?
So here's a final thought for you, our listener. Think about your own life. How often do you see things that might actually be clues to bigger, more complex questions?
Maybe there are eureka moments hidden in your everyday life.
It's something to think about. Anyway, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep on learning.
Keep on exploring.
And who knows, maybe you'll have your own eureka moment soon.
You never know.